Hi, I'm John Friend. This is Desi Springer. We want to present to you the Bowspring Method. It is a postural system that is for everyday functionality, optimal movement during our day. It is a posture that is dynamic, it is open, and it is quite curvy. In contrast to our standard model of posture, the Bowspring is quite different. So Desi, let's show just some basic contrast between the Bowspring and standard model. If you would just face this direction and stand so that we can see from the side. For good posture, in most systems, we try to stack the head, the shoulders, and the hips in a vertical line over the ankles so that the straight line is in alignment with the flow of gravity, and so there's no shearing or no forces that are causing the body to have too much force or too much weight in one part than another. In contrast, the Bowspring is curvy. So can you do the standard model, tuck under, make it straight? It's not so easy for you. The Bowspring in the back, okay, now release. The Bowspring is from the pelvic floor to the top of the head, a curvy shape that in the middle of this place between the hips and the head is the rib cage. And the fullness of the ribs expands in a way that the primary curve of the spine here in the thoracic is full. It's not flat. Can you pin your shoulders back to contrast? So in many times in good posture, we try to pull our shoulders back and make the spine in the upper back too flat. But with the Bowspring, we're opening the primary curve, the first curve of the spine, in a way that is three-dimensional. It is full on the sides of the body, on the sides of the ribs. It's full on the back and the front. And with the Bowspring, the rib cage is always light up away from the earth. So there's always a floating, a rising away from the earth. When the primary curve of the spine is initially round or full, then we connect into the shoulder girdle. Now the shoulder girdle will also help us with the ribs. In this position where Desi is standing, she's making her hands curled so that she has the ability to engage the muscles of the hands up and through the arms into the shoulders. The arms are straight. And in this way, if you could turn now toward the camera and show that you can maintain your arms straight, but you can move your ribs free side to side. When the arms are stabilized, the rib cage can have more capacity for freedom. So in the Bowspring, we stabilize the whole of the arm and the shoulders initially to allow for this expansion in the rib cage. The shoulder girdle in the Bowspring has not only an expansion, that the collarbones on the front and the shoulder blades on the back widen, but the entire shoulder girdle is being expanded and lifted up away from the center of the ribs, away from the center of the heart. Could you turn around for us, please? Now bring the shoulders back and down. So most postural ideas for the shoulders are to make the shoulders go back and to draw down away from the ears. But with the Bowspring, we try to broaden all sides of the ribs, and the shoulder girdle widens and floats up away from the center of the ribs in this part. Once the ribs are full, once the shoulders are broad and lifted, we go down to the roots. And the roots includes the feet, the legs, and the hips. Here, in contrast to the standard model, which to elongate the spine pulls the hips down. Can you do that? Can you make the legs straight and make the legs straight and pull the hips down? And in this way, the standard model tries to create a straightening or a lengthening of the spine by pulling one end of the spine down and one end of the other end, the top part up. And it makes the spine straighter. There may be a little bit of curve, but in general, the spine is flat. Okay? Let's do the Bowspring. So we start again in the core of the rib cage. The whole central tube is long and free and open. And in the ribs, there's an expansion, wide. Back and front are full. The shoulders float wide and up. And then down in the hips, Desi bends the knees in order for the hips to have more movement. And the hips tip back. Now let's go to the side so they can see the relationship of the hips to the rib cage. The rib cage is more vertical in the bowspring, but the hips move back behind the rib cage. So the pelvic floor, demarked by the pubis and the sitting bones, is more horizontal and level. Rib cage is more vertical, but the pelvic floor is more level. In this way, from the action of the feet, the engagement of the connective tissue, the fascia and the muscles, are engaged on all sides up, and even the hip muscles of the gluteus can lift. In this way, the tailbone is not pulled down, it is actually moved back, and there's a rising. The waist then has a freedom to go forward and up. This all gets more bowed and elongated, and it is very parallel to the shape of the neck. Both the waist and the neck have curves. There's a curve in the back of the neck, a big curve in the low back, and both are long and tapering upward. And then finally, the head is floating on the top of the neck in a way that the eyes are level, horizontal. The orbit of the eye is in the front is vertical, and the head is extending straight up. The back of the head can press so that the back of the neck is also engaged. Now this shape gives a relationship between the rib cage, the hips, and the head, so that there's quite a curve on the back. If we bring in the back of the skull is rounded, then there's a curve in the neck, the upper back has a fullness, a curve in the low back, and a fullness in the hips. This is the shape of a double S curve. This is the shape of the bowspring. Once we have this shape and there's engagement from the hands and the feet through the arms and the legs into the shoulders and the hips, the whole central axis has an integration which then can be quite dynamic. It's springy. It isn't that we hold the pose in a static way and hold it without moving. In fact, Desi can pulsate. Now this pulsation just standing can start at the feet. There's a pushing down, a rooting down for a rising up, a lengthening upward, up through the top of the head. So in the bowspring, we're moving, and we want to be able to move freely and powerfully. Please turn toward the camera. Bring your hands into double seeds. Now, all these shapes that we'll teach you in the next 10 days, the hands, the feet, all have specific forms for a maximum and optimal engagement through the arms and the legs. These are our elemental forms of the Bowspring Method. This is one of them. The hand is shaped like a seed, and here both hands are touching and pressing. Now this gives the ability for the rib cage. Desi can widen the ribs and expand back and front, and the whole rib cage is fuller in this way. From here, take the hands out horizontally. The knuckles can point down. Though she's pushing down with the hands, the ribs rise up. Go to the side, lean to one side. So the actions of the bowspring are uniform through any position. So even though she's bending to the side, the shoulders still go up and apart. There's a widening. So this shoulder is not being pulled down. The whole shoulder girdle floats up. The outer elbow even slides up. But all the while, the hands can press down for the neck to get longer. Every position of the bowspring, the central channel, is long and free. Good, great. Come back up and let's do the other side. Lean to the left. From inside the ribs, widen and let the shoulder girdle float upward. In every bowspring position, the ribs, the upper part of the body is light. We never make this upper part of the body heavy. The bottom part, the roots, is dynamic and powerful. To be able to do that, Desi pushes even from her feet and knees forward to get her groins deeply hollow and moving the hips back. That makes the glutes have a chance to be able to lift, and then she has power to spring and to move, to pulse. Good. And then inhale back to center. Good. Please turn now this way toward me. Take a wide stance. Every movement in the Bowspring method is very mindful. So we're trying to maintain this relationship between the heart, the hips, and the head with these curves in a way that is dynamic and open on the front and the back of the body evenly. From here, bend forward and touch the floor. So even though Desi just bent over, she didn't lose the relationship between the upper back fullness, a curve in the low back, and a curve in the neck. Bring the hands down onto the floor. This is called bright hands, and we'll be describing this in more detail. This is one of the elemental forms of the method. Then please step back onto your knees. Every position that the feet and the hands can make, like where the toes are tucked under, we have a definition for the form. This is called crouching feet. Bring your hands into hero feet. With hero feet, the top of the feet are on the floor, but the front of the ankle lifts. And the specific actions of the feet and the hands, the purpose is to give uniformity of action for the legs and the arms. So everything starts to integrate into the central core, into the central axis of the body. Once again, the ribs are not only expanding, but they're light up away from the earth. And once this primary curve is inflated and light, Desi can also then curve the low back and curve the neck. From here, tuck the toes, lift the knees up, and again, the relationship is maintained. Turn both knees to the left, bring the right hip down, slide the right arm long. The ribs stay light. Separate the knees and the feet slightly apart. Good. Tip the top of the head back and come onto your back. Put the feet onto the floor, stretch the arms straight, and then maneuver back onto your mat without losing the curves of the low back and the neck. Take the arms up so we can see the back. Here, while Desi is doing a supine position on her back, she still makes the whole central channel, this axis, very full and long. And in the middle of this axis, from the pelvic floor to the top of the head, the very center of it is the center of the rib cage. There, you imagine an expansion of light. You can imagine expansion of energy, which is fundamentally a positive attitude. And that creates a widening in the rib cage, a fullness in the ribs. The ribs, even on her back, it's light. The rib cage can get a sense of floating. And that's just to show that how light the ribs can go, is she can lift the ribs up off the floor. Good. Bring the rib cage down. Then go down into the hips. Tip the groins down more, and the waist and the low back, it can rise up. Everything we do in the bowspring with the feet and the knees will affect the hips. All of this bottom part of the body, the roots, we consider as a subsystem that connects into the full system of the whole body. So if we bring our knees a little bit closer together, Desi has more capacity to draw the groins down. If she pushes down through the feet and drags the heel back, the hip muscles can firm and actually be pulled upward toward the low back. In the back of the head, the back of the neck, press the head, Desi, backwards so the top of the ears press. The front of the throat will open and the back of the neck gets a curve and an engagement. So there is a toning, there's literally an engagement of the fascia and muscle through the whole of the body. And the intention in the bowspring is to make that engagement uniform on all sides. So this is the general shape. So even if you stretch your legs out, the shape of the middle doesn't change at all. Still, the part that is most curved is right at the base of the ribs. The vertebrae there at the very bottom of the rib cage is the 12th vertebrae of the thoracic, T12. The pubis is down. The navel is higher than the pubis when she is in a supine position. Okay? Now let's roll to your right all the way under your stomach. Every movement in the bowspring, these transitions are defined so that she is very aware, very mindful of her intention on how to move, how to align. So it's not just an unconscious, unfocused movement. Everything is specific in the alignment here in the bowspring. Put your hands in, make a heart hands, rose hands like that, and then put your forehead onto the hands. Central channel long. Number one, here in the ribs, a fullness. So instead of the shoulder blades coming closer together, the shoulder blades are broad and widening. Bend the knees, just to show. So though the legs are bent to a square, Desi finds the feet, and we'll be describing this, where there's a flexion on the front of the ankle and yet a elongation, a stretching on the forefoot here where the pads and the mounds of the foot go. When Desi presses down from the feet and presses the knees down, the hips can rise. The groins rise up away from the floor, the hips tip, and the low back goes all the way again to T12. So in every case of the bowspring, the deepest part of the curve between the relationship of the thoracic into the lumbar is going to be here right at the base of the ribs. And there is a curve in the neck, so it's not flat, and you can even see that there's a trench in the back of the neck. This again, there's the double S curve. Good, Desi, thank you. All right, roll to your left side. So you can see from the back, do seed or dome hand and make the arm straight. Fill in the rib cage, and the ribs are full. Now show what it looks like to pull the arm into the socket. This type of pull is not just a lot of times what we've been taught how to get good posture in our shoulders, but is also a reaction to a protective unconscious mechanism in the body where we pull in for safety. But when we do that, the upper back flattens. Instead, with the bowspring, we spread the upper back, the shoulder blades open, and the shoulder itself slides toward the ear. From here, the groins go back, the feet are active, and this action is consciously drawing the connective tissue of the legs up into the hips. Here again, the direction of the glutes is from the base into the low back. So every bowspring position, every bowspring movement, it's the same direction. Here the hips are lifting, curve in the low back to the T12. Upper back is full, and there's a curve in the neck. The throat is open. Please come onto all fours. When we unconsciously protect ourselves in fear, biologically, we all do the same thing. If you imagine that you hear a loud sound that you're not sure what it is, what will happen is we try to close the front of the body. The upper back will round, the tailbone will tuck, the belly will tighten, the chin will go down. Let's do it. Take the groins back with the heart full. Good. And then separate the knees tuck the toes under, and we'll go back up standing. So to go back up, lift the knee, one knee and then the other, move the hands back, float the ribs up. From the side, step forward, please. Show the position of, let's go through the 10 key areas of the body, the bowspring, and show what happens when the body contracts and closes for protection, for under fear, under just trying to get a nurturing feeling and sadness. So in the rib cage, what happens? The ribs shrink. There's a shrinking inside. And there's a drawing, a heaviness downward. In the shoulders, we pull from the hands, and there's a drawing back into the shoulders. The shoulders pin back when we try to protect. The neck will shorten. Yeah. The elbows go back and in. That protects our sides. We feel more secure when we do that. It's completely unconscious. And then what happens, Desi, in the hands? Under fear, the hands spread. You see the thumbs pull back. This is a position of the hands when they're scared, when the mind is frightened. And the back of the hand gets very tense. You can see it. The palm stretches a lot. When we go down to the feet, let's face the camera. Under fear, the feet contract on the front. So all of the connective tissue on the front of the body will shorten in a fear response. The toes lift. The tendons of the front of the foot contract. And you see here how much the toes pull back and the tendons stick out like that. Okay? The heels will root as the legs go back. So the legs straighten in this contractive closed position, and even the knees might come closer to protect the pelvic floor. And there at the pelvic floor, the tail tucks, the glutes draw down, pelvic floor narrows. In the abdomen, there's a shortening. So from the navel to the sternum, it's short. The diaphragm contracts. That's the fear position. And then into the throat, there's contraction. The neck turtles. He pulls the head back. And that's how we create the form to protect. Now, that's the closed position. Let's go through the same 10 places of the body to show for the bowspring. In the rib cage here, and let's go to the side too and kind of even move. We can pivot to show that the sides of the ribs inflate, the back and the front open. When we feel safe, when we feel free, when we feel happy, the attitude from inside expands the ribs three-dimensionally on all sides. This expansion from the very center of the ribs is first, and then the shoulder girdle widens and lifts. It's completely opposite than when we pull the shoulders down or flatten the shoulders back. In the elbows in the bowspring will move forward, up, and apart. In the hands are more like domes. When there's a balance, there is a roundedness on the back of the hand instead of this contraction, and the palm can tone. The base of the palm is very critical in the bowspring, the mound of the thumb and the mound of the little finger. And so the center of the palm can hollow. When you can firm consciously the base of the palm, the connective tissue up into the arm and the shoulder is very strong, like Desi's demonstrating. This integration into the rib cage, into the upper back and all around the chest, give that expansion of a freedom of the spirit, something to push out against. So a pull from the hands matches and balances with the dynamic push from inside. Then we go all the way down to the roots from the feet. Instead of the toes lifting up, the toe pads behind the nails and the mounds of the feet actually press down. You can show lifting and placing of a foot. In the bowspring, the top of the foot here is more domed. It is more soft. It's like the roundedness of the hand exactly. There's still a tone here in the front of the ankle, that's pushing forward. It's not pointing foot. There's a flexion. That shape of the foot underneath is a dome. They're just like in the center of the palm, there's a dome in the center of the foot. This action of the feet, this position, and then the action of pushing down, pushing forward, and then dragging back create a tone that's uniform on all sides of the leg going up into the hip. In the knees, instead of the knees going back and in the closed position, the bowspring dynamic open position, the knees move forward, up, and apart. So and even initially, we can think of letting the knees move in for the groins to go back. So the position of the knees and the action of the feet will affect the hips. This is all one connection, one subsystem of the whole. So knees can go initially in toward each other, hips can go back, then you can push the knees apart, and that action makes the hips go up. So you can see from the side that the pelvis is even behind the rib cage. This is a clear definition of the bowspring relationship between heart, hips, and then the head. Tailbone moves back and rises up. Not only do the glutes lift, but the groins go down and hollow really deeply back. In the waist, instead of the belly shortening in the closed position, the belly is long and there's a tapering up in the bowspring. So let's face the camera for a second. Put your hands on your waist and show that when we contract the front of the belly, that the sides actually flatten, they widen out to the side. So this is a much more straight up and down here at the waist. When we fill up the ribs, move the groins back, the waist here at the top of the waist will narrow. That's for everyone. Men and women will get more of a narrow waistline in the bowspring when there's this alignment. This from the navel to the sternum is long. And with the dynamic action of the bowspring, not just holding, but this rooting and rising, the abdominal area and the whole of the torso is very strong. So though it's stretching long and open, it's not weak. It's very strong. Then going up into the neck in the bowspring, instead of the chin going down and short in the throat is open, the neck is curved. Yeah. And instead of the chin going down, there's an openness in the throat. The eyes look in the horizon. And instead of it turtling down, the head actually rises up. So the whole central axis of the body in the bowspring is full. All right, lastly, let's show now the bowspring upside down. So we can show that the shape, no matter what direction, unidirectional, it's the same. So I'm going to spot you in a handstand just for purposes of edification. Face me, please. And then let's separate the feet wide apart. Bend forward, touch the floor. Dome to bright. One leg up. I'll spot you here. And even while she's going up into the handstand, same thing. Ribs are full. Hips lift. So she doesn't kick up. She's using from her feet the connective tissue up into the hips. Upside down, the ribs are expanding on all sides and they're going up away from the earth. The arms are straight and the shoulders are expanding. In the roots from the feet through the legs and the hips, the feet have the same action. So if I put my hands on the top of the feet, she can push up to the ceiling, in this case, just like she was pushing the floor when she was going to jump. You see the shape of the low back is quite curved. The hips are rising away from the ribs. There's a great length in the waistline when even in this position. Let's go all the way to handstand straight legs. So just like when she's standing in the bowspring, it's identical upside down. There's a deep curve, but the curve is long and the stretch is up. It's great. Good. And then bend the knees to slowly come back down. She comes down mindfully so that it isn't just a position, it's the movement done with mindfulness, with a soft sensitivity, and a complete depth of will in order to bring balance and harmony to all sides of the body-mind. This is the Bowspring. In the next days, in these next videos, we'll show you the details of every part of the 10 key areas of the body: the rib cage, the shoulders, arms for the elbows, the hands, the feet, the knees, the hips, the waist and neck, and the head. These are the 10 key areas of the Bowspring. Each one has a very clear definition of shape and action. The actions remain the same no matter if you're upside down, standing, on your back, or your front, all the same. And the pose is dynamic. So this is what we use during our day, and it's for walking, standing, sitting. It's posture at our desk. It's even sitting in the house in any position or any place or chair. It is a place where there's balance and power and yet freedom on all sides. In all cases, the pose feels light and free. It's for our health and for a deep harmony of the mind and body. So we welcome you to give this practice a full experience. Thank you so much.